Hi, everybody. This is Kubernetes SIG architecture meeting for April 2nd, 2026. And looking at the agenda, I'll share it briefly. Looks like we have one item on declarative validation from Aaron Prindle. So, Aaron, I will let you share if you need to share. Um,
Okay, for sure. Yeah,
and then I'll stop sharing and we'll get started.
great. Let me just get this going. Cool. Can folks see my screen? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, great. Cool. Yeah, so this is just the PR, but just at a high level, essentially with declarative validation, in 136, we've gotten to the point where we are hoping and moving to 137 to kind of change the API best practices or standards for new API creation and new API field creation. So as part of updating the docs, I just wanted to bring to SIGArch kind of the concept and just get feedback. I'm happy to go through the document. But the idea would be that moving forward, instead of using a handwritten validation logic when adding a new field, you can imagine if you had a new string field, you maybe want to enforce, the length of the field or some kind of just normal or a format. That would be done through declarative validation. So you would tag it in the types.go file. You would get automatically generated validation code. And then we are working on additional guardrails, but essentially then you would get a standard, sorry, sure. You would get a standard set of kind of tags that a user could use to allow for making these things declarative. So we're going to modify the process. And if you look at the document there, the goal would be to kind of change the standard. So I just wanted to maybe open up. I'm happy to kind of go through things in detail. If anyone had any questions out there, I'm happy to kind of dig through. So it'd kind of be around, so someone feature gates, right, their new field, it adds the tags, and then that would be kind of this new process. And we're working on guardrails around testing, but currently those would be manually validated.
So how does the feature interact with like emulated version and things like that?
For sure. Yeah. So as far as we have guidance around, I don't know, Yanri, are you here? I know that you had your feature gate PR out, which I can actually jump to. That addresses this, I think, in more details, the emulation version specifics. I can share this tag, but Yanri, are you in the call?
Yeah, so for emulated version, for declarative validation point of view, it's not directly subject to the feature gate enablement, disablement, and interaction with the emulated version itself. It's all passed down by the strategy and how the author wire it up and pass it into as an option in the declarative validation generated code. So it totally depends on how the types and strategy are configured and how they value respect the emulated versions.
I get, sorry, Tim's got his hand up. Maybe I should let him go first, but I had a follow up.
Do your follow up and I'll
Okay.
jump in after.
Like specifically, like I'm wondering about, occasionally, occasionally we relax validation across versions, and would those need to be handcrafted, or is there support for that in the declarative validation framework?
It's not different. Technically, there's no different as for the current handwritten validation regarding the feature gated validation logic. It just we just want to set an guidance and how we would like to have as a best practice to treat the fields regarding to the how they should value the respect the honor the feature gate.
Yeah, I think for this specific case, it's a good point in that so right now declarative validation has horizontal support for ratcheting generally, where it compares if a type was previously allowed, we allow it in, but currently we don't split out declarative validation by version. So to your point, I believe if you introduced the validation at like alpha in the feature gate, and then you progressed it, like we have one set of declarative validation code currently, so maybe it is worth considering. But we have horizontal ratcheting support, but we don't split out by version currently.
So like,
So
I'm not concerned. Yeah.
Let me throw a bit of context in here. Like, there are a couple of different paths that we generally operate on when we're talking about APIs. I'm adding a new field to an existing API, right? Which has no handwritten validation already because it's a new field. And I think the core of this proposal is for those new fields, let's use declarative validation. And that comes with some semantic changes that I suggested that we bring to this group just to put out there, make sure people understand and agree with the semantic changes. The other major track is we're taking an existing field which has handwritten validation and converting it to use declarative validation. And those are totally different things, right? And we should never, ideally, change the handwritten validation at the same time as adding new declarative validation. But sorry, I lost my screen. What happened there? And occasionally we find a place where the semantics are kind of wrong and we have to do that, but those are relatively rare and not common things. Focusing on net new fields, I think, is what we're talking about here, right? So I'm taking an existing API and I'm adding a new field with a feature gate. There's a third path, which is I'm changing the behavior of an existing field. That is really rarely done. And I think that is okay if we consider those as sort of case by case, how we want to handle those.
That's kind of what I was asking about. Like, rarely we'll take a V1, like not changing the validation from alpha to beta or beta to G, but we'll take a V1 field and we'll be like, let's relax the validation on this. It's unusual, like you said.
Yeah, it's very unusual. Yeah. And if we did that, it would involve changing the handwritten validation too, right? The goal of declarative validation through our testing is to make sure that whatever result you got from handwritten validation, you will also get from declarative validation, keeping those two things in sync. It doesn't attest to whether either one is correct. It just says that they're the same, right? So Aaron, I think the interesting part here, the thing that we should focus on is the behavior of what happens with respect to the feature gate, because today it's kind of all over the place in handwritten code, right? There was very little consistency across those implementations of what you do when the feature gate is not enabled. Some APIs say if it's not enabled, and here enabled historically means the gate is enabled or the feature is already in use, right? I will just say enabled to mean the same thing. Historically, we say if the feature is not enabled, we just skip over that field and we don't validate it at all. There's a lot. Jordan's shaking his head. There's a lot of code that does that.
That is not the predominant approach. I mean, I can totally believe we do it some places, but predominantly validation only looks at the data in the field. If the data is in the field, we run the validation. And the feature gatedness, what we do in response to the feature being turned off is we drop the data from the field before we get to validation.
Yeah. So validation mostly assumes that if the feature gate is not enabled, the data should have been dropped long before it gets into validation, right? It should have been wiped.
I would say that's like skipping validation, saying like the feature is off, but there's data in this field, but we're just going to not validate it at all. It's
terrible. It's absolutely the wrong thing to do, right? So what we're proposing
why would we want validation to be informed by whether the feature's on or off?
It's a fair question. There are cases where we do change it and where we need to know that.
I don't think we need to know that. Like the ratcheting stuff is supposed to handle the case where we tightened or loosened or whatever, we changed validation and there's already persisted data and we don't want to blow that up. Like that's fair, but ratcheting was supposed to handle that. Like the data's already there, you didn't change it on update, don't blow up. So I thought the ratcheting would handle just a data case, and like systematizing dropping data for fields which are feature disabled. Like it would be good to systematize that, but I think we don't want to
Right.
mix that in with validation. That's like a distinct, this field is tied to this feature, so if it's off and this is create, like clear the
Right.
out. Like
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
step.
And Joe's exploring how we can automate that aspect of it, which I think is completely the correct thing to do.
So the distinction you made between new fields, which we're like rolling out, and we want to clear if the feature's not yet on. Like I think we do want to do that, but that's a step before you get to validation. The other aspect where we're changing validation in some way, tightening or loosening or allowing a new enum value or like making some change, that I could see informing that aspect of validation, but that's only when we're doing a validation change associated with a gate or relaxation of some sort.
Okay. I think that's actually a really valuable point. I'm looking at the example that's on the screen now. And I mean, Aaron Youngry, what if we just didn't? Like, what if in this case it turned into, we just get rid of the if enabled, if disabled, and we said, this field is, it was
like all new fields added to existing types must be optional.
Yes, totally correct.
And so the maximum, I would expect this new field to be optional because it's optional. And if it's present, it has to pass this maximum 128. Like, who cares?
I'm trying to remember. I know we thought through this, and I'm trying to remember what the context was for saying, no, we need to implement this forbidden semantic. And I'm failing to remember what it was. Aaron Youngry, do you remember?
I think it's for the new APIs. The author don't want to do the validation if the feature is disabled, and otherwise they need to go through these maximum check. But
if the feature is disabled, it should be removed long before it gets into validation.
Tying the presence of a field to a feature, like there's two things we could do. We could drop the data from the field, or we could reject the object. Like rejecting is rare. Mostly that's been around security related fields. Like we would rather fail an object than let it in. Typically we drop the field, but occasionally we do reject. But that feels like something that happens before validation. So
is it better to actually do that before validation though? Like so we've done it before on pods security context stuff. And is it actually like it's good to drop it? That makes sense. But for ones where we do just really want to reject it, this capability seems useful to have, and it doesn't seem harmful to have.
I would do both of those things at the same point, like either drop or reject. But like it's orthogonal to validation.
Well, so it could be, but but it could also say don't have the optional or the maximum be if enabled. Those be not gated at all. But
I agree. Optional and maximum are validation related, and that's like if there's data in the field, here's how
forbidden seems straightforward to have here and useful.
I don't disagree. I'm saying
belts and suspenders.
I want to say this field is tied to this gate, and if this gate isn't enabled, what should I do? I should drop it or I should forbid it. Like,
yeah, I think that's the thing we are discussing, whether this forbidden should be here for when the feature gate is disabled.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's.
I think if I can interpret what Jordan's saying is validation shouldn't care. Validation works on the data as we get it. Yes. And if we're not supposed to have gotten it, that's somebody else's problem to have solved before it got to us.
Before validation, either drop it or forbid it. But once you get to validation, like don't validate differently based on.
So why would we not want to have the forbid just because you don't want the suspenders there?
I'm okay with forbid, but
Okay.
forbid should happen
Okay.
before you get to validation. At the same point, we would otherwise drop it. Like drop it or forbid it. Either is fine.
So forbid is more like if we put a forbid in a validation, it's more like a safe net if it's not dropped, right?
I don't want validation to be inspecting feature gate enablement. I think that's an accident waiting to happen. Like validation should validate the data it's given.
So I like that, and we've done a pretty good job at holding that in the past. Pretty good, not always perfect. Look, I mean, the fun thing about declarative validation is you get to go back and revisit a lot of the code that we wrote a long time ago.
Find all the things that, yeah.
Right, or just just how our understanding of the problem has changed over 10 years. But I'm really struggling. I swear there was some reason this came up in the workload API cap, right, Youngri?
Yeah.
And I'm struggling to remember why I thought it was important that we have the fallback path.
I think because when the workload API validation introduced in a 135, it has the handwritten validation at a time, and it directly wired the feature gate check inside the handwritten validation. So when we're trying to move, so we just follow that logic, and we want to have these in honor.
We know, like, it's already a smell the second that validation code looks at a feature gate directly, right? And we instead usually pass down these options, but maybe we've gotten too cavalier about what constitutes an option. And we
most of the options I think are around ratcheting, where it's like,
yes,
and so right. if we've systematized ratcheting, I'm not sure we need the option plumbing so much.
I mean, there's something nice when you look at this and you say, hey, if I somehow got in here and I'm not supposed to have data and I do have data, then at least we'll throw an error. But the other side of that is that's not a validation problem. That's an admission problem.
When we add a valid data, enumerated value, and it gets added for one version, say 138, what do we do when we emulate version 137?
Yeah, so
we have a different mechanism for that, which is to say there's an enumeration, and there's this value is excluded if the gate is set.
David, I agree with like that aspect, the valid values, or when we're changing validation on an existing field, that does seem like it needs to be informed by something like gate related.
Yeah, but for just simply adding a new field, which is covered by a gate, but the meaning of the gate isn't, maybe we've just become hyper focused on validation and we thought we could solve it here, so we should. But just because you can maybe doesn't mean we should. And instead, what Joe's been sort of exploring with declarative field wiping would be a better result here, that this feature gate equals tag turns into automatically wipe this field.
Like automatically wipe or automatically forbid. I can see use cases for both, and I think they should happen at the same place.
Yeah, I mean, wipe is the thing that we do the vast majority of the time because we want to pretend as if the client didn't send it to us, which is not right either.
I know. Yeah, we've typically only forbidden for like security sensitive or like terrible correctness for like if we let this if we erase this field that the user meant, like horrible things will happen.
Right. So what if we just, Youngri, what if we just didn't do this? I apologize for the work invested in getting this far. But what if that was the line? Like, we should revisit the 3 or so places that followed this pattern today, because we unfortunately we recommended this pattern for folks late in the KEP cycle this time, but those are all in alpha APIs or beta APIs anyway, so we could undo this pattern.
I think for the new APIs, we definitely can write and draw the guidance to make sure the feature gate is honored when the field is wiping. But actually, in the current handwritten validation, there's already a feature gate being honored everywhere in the handwritten validation code. So, do we want this be just for new APIs, or
can we list out where that's happening and what categories if it's expanding values like a new enum value, yeah, that's something we have to figure out how to model with DV the same way we do with handwritten. If there are places in handwritten where we're just skipping validation of existing data when the gate is disabled, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, I as a reviewer, I've been pretty good about saying no, you don't check the gates in validation. And then somehow my brain shifted as we're looking at the declarative stuff, and I thought, no, we need this sort of a pattern here.
Yeah,
it's definitely come up. I think we've done it in job validation as well, where it was if you have this feature gate enabled, then we changed validation for existing status fields.
Sure, it's like the scale to 0 for HPA is one of those cases, right? Do you allow 0 or 1?
Yeah, so when we're tightening or relaxing validation of a previously existing field, like
so we will keep the ability to do this. It just won't be the recommended path for
most fields.
Or new fields where like presence or absence of the new field is contingent on a gate as we're rolling a new field out.
Okay. That's fine.
Right.
So we just we delegate these to the field wiping, and we are not throwing out the forbidden because it's not the validation's responsibility to cover the new field.
So this field should, like this one on the screen, should just be optional and maximum equals 128, and that's it. And because it's optional, if there's no data, we won't validate anything. And if there is data there, then the gate must have been enabled because somebody else let this through.
Or it's an update of an object that already had.
Well, we wouldn't execute the validation in that point anyway.
If the data didn't change, if the data did change, then
somebody else let it through.
Maximum 128. Yeah.
Right.
So like that's a good example of, if the gate was disabled, you're updating an object that already had data in this field. The current example on screen would have said, oh, the gate's not enabled, therefore no rules. You can update this existing object that already had data in this field to anything you want. And I'm saying, no, actually, if you're updating an existing object that has data in this field, like you can make it a no-op and ratcheting will let you pass, or you have to pass this maximum 120. If you change the field, like we still want to apply these rules.
I think I remember what the interesting case was. There was some discussion around given a feature gated field like this, right? Yeah. And assume now the user turned the gate on, set the value of 42, and then their administrator turned the gate off. Mm-hmm. Now, any updates to the object that leave it at 42 are fine, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're not even going to revalidate it. We just do a comparison. Most of the field wiping logic is the gate enabled or is the field in use, right? Mm-hmm. So the field in use check would be, this is not nil. Okay. So now the user sends an update to change it from 42 to 43. Mm-hmm. Is that allowed? The feature gate is off. Mm-hmm. Are they allowed to change the value to another valid value? Or is it, no, you can keep it 42, but you can't change it to 43?
So I would expect it to pass the wiping because you already had data in this field. You still have data in this field. Like you were using this field and populating it. Like we're not going to wipe it.
Right.
And then it gets to the rules that exist. And if it passes the rules, if 43 is also a valid value according to the rules that are defined, yeah, you can update it.
So we're saying that we expect the policy for all fields to be, if you're already in use for this feature, then you can keep using the feature even if the gate is disabled, and we don't really know what that means because different features enable it differently.
Yeah.
And to make it more complicated, there are lots of features that involve more than one field. And so now you're saying you can change one field, but you might not be able to change another field if it was related to it.
You got data in to gated field, so it must have been on at some point.
Right.
You know, admin turned the gate on and turned the gate off for some reason. They downgraded, or it's a mitigation or whatever. Like, we don't know why it got turned off. We're not going to make you lose data. If you have objects that got in the door when the thing was enabled, like continuing to let them set those fields seems
the distinction here is whether in the case where they change it from 42 to 43, should that succeed and accept 43, or should it fail? And I think we assessed for the feature that we were talking with the workload API folks, they wanted it to fail. And this was the pattern that we said, this is how you can implement it. Because when you get into validation, the gate is not set. And we are revalidating it because it failed ratchet, and like it failed the equivalency check. Ergo, you can return a forbidden in this pattern.
I don't really understand the rationale of preventing a mutation, like being okay with a persisted value related to a gate that's now disabled, but not being okay with the mutation of a value.
One of the rationales, now it's all coming back to me now. The rationale for some of this was the value of, I forget exactly which field it was, but the value of the field has some impact on the running system. And when it was set at 42, it configured the system in a certain way with 42. And then we allow them to change it to 43, but the feature gate is off. So we're not actually going to go change the system to use 43.
That feels
because
thin.
the guidance around feature gates says
43, like you don't know if a controller already saw the 42 or not. Like that feels thin, but
I mean, what you end up with is the ability for people to see 43 in the API and go, why is 43 not working? Let me try 44. Oh, 44 doesn't work either.
If there's a behavior that can be driven by this, then it better be reflected in a status or a condition somewhere. And there's always the possibility of an async, like you asked for 43 and I couldn't give it to you. Like that just doesn't seem compelling to me. There's always a controller off somewhere that might not be able to do the thing you asked for. That has to be observable, reflected somehow.
I agree with all of that. I'm just now filling in the details about why we ended up on this path.
Yeah.
I think we don't have a conclusion whether when the feature gate is disabled, the new added validation rule need to be run. Like for this case, the maximum 128, should it run when the feature gate is disabled?
And there's data in the field? Yes.
Yeah. Jordan's saying it's like essentially you drop the if enabled, and that should be the like how it works. Like that's kind of what's being stated right now. Because the only interesting part is like kind of the update case, but we're now saying that the update policy we want is that mutations are always okay. It seems like, I don't know if we've actually aligned on that, but
there's two scenarios here. One is new field associated with the gate. You know, we have a bunch of validation associated with that. I'm saying if there's data in the field, the validation should run. If we don't want that validation to run, we should clear out the data earlier or forbid the data earlier. That's one scenario. The other scenario is you have an existing field that we already released that already has data in it. We want to change the validation in some way, like add a new enum value or relax or restrict validation. And that we need to think about, like if you're adding a new allowed enum value, how would you roll that out? You know, so maybe there's still something there with like there's a gate associated with the new policy. Like so, let's think about that case.
We actually have that case covered through a different mechanism.
Okay.
It looks at the option field, right, and it has the same if enabled thing, but it says you have enum values A, B, and C, and now you've added D, and you say if not enabled, then exclude D. You say that on the D value, right? If not enabled, exclude this. And we have tests for that. I don't think we've deployed it into any real fields yet, but we have tests for it, and the test cases are clean. So
like new enum value, or like we used to allow a max of 128. Now we want to allow a max of 120. Maybe ratcheting.
But ratcheting will cover if you didn't change it. The if enabled will allow you to raise the limit, right? So you go from 128 to 256 by saying if enabled 256. If disabled 120, max equals 128. I think that's okay.
So for the example on screen, I think what we're saying is like the optional and maximum stuff, we should just drop if enabled. Like that should always be there. The forbidden piece, David would like a way to do that declaratively, and I don't object to that. That feels like it belongs more up on the like feature gate. Like this field is associated with this feature gate, and the default declarative thing for a feature gate is just drop data on create when the feature is disabled. But maybe having a way to say like this field is associated with this feature gate, and I want to forbid data. Like,
so I think given the primitives of if enabled, if disabled, any user could choose to express what we have on the screen here. I think what we're saying is most of the time, 99.99% of the time, don't. Right? Instead, just express it directly as optional and maximum is 128. And that's what you want almost always. And if you can find a really good reason why you need to say forbidden, then the primitive exists here, but your reviewer is going to ask you why you did that.
That makes sense. The only times I can think of doing it in the past have been related to stuff in the security context field.
Yep.
And just to be clear, the if disabled forbidden will be ignored on a no op update for ratcheting.
That's right. Ratcheting, in the case of ratcheting, none of these are evaluated.
Okay. Is so that okay, so that's I guess there's three possibilities. One is wipe. One is allow updates that don't change the value. And the third is allow updates that do change a value if there was already a value there.
I think what we're saying is the general pattern that almost all APIs are going to follow is if you made it through the door in the past, you're through the door. Yeah. And you can change within the valid space, but what it actually means depends on how the feature is implemented with the gate. But from the validation point of view, we're not going to exclude you changing 42 to 43.
Okay, I guess I'm not sure what line 793 would do if you had a value. If you had an object with 42 and you wanted to change it to 43, like it was already there.
It would trigger forbidden if the gate was disabled.
Okay.
But this is not so. For the forbidden, we're not enforced for every new fields, right? It depends on whether the owner wants it.
Right. So the work that you did to make this happen automatically with the feature gate tag would actually be the opposite of what we want. Sorry.
Okay. There's three behaviors: wipe, forbid in new, forbid mutate. And I think only two of those are addressable right now. The forbid new, I don't think you could accomplish with what we have here.
Forbid new value?
Like,
or forbid new use?
Forbid new use. While allowing mutation of existing use.
Yes, it's either you're allowed to have the field or you're not allowed to have the field. We don't have a way to express. I think if I understand you correctly.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'll take that back. We have a separate other tag, which is what you're allowed to do on an update operation, right? Oh. And that is, again, sort of intended to be sort of niche in its usage, but it includes things like, can you update a field from set to from present to absent, right? Could you revert this from 42 to nil, right? Is that an allowable update for this field? But that's covered through a different tag.
Okay.
There's a tag for that. Okay. So I think we're okay. We still need to update the guidance to tell people what this means, and what they can expect, so that the next time somebody comes in and says, I don't want to allow you to update from 42 to 43, we say, but that's how we do it.
Okay. So for FeatureGate, it's this tag itself for example, in 790, it's still not consistent across. We still need to rely on what the field owner really wants, and that then to configure the text with the
I think the FeatureGate tag at line 790 is what Joe would ratchet's the wrong word. What Joe would attach to when he's writing the declarative field wiping idea.
Yeah, sorry, I had something else. I had to show up late. It sounds like, I mean, we're still going to have some declarative field wiping in some cases, right? Like on create for many APIs is still the norm.
I mean, if you can get declarative field wiping working, then that's great, because you trigger off of the FeatureGate equals tag and say, I'll do the wiping based on that. And then validation should never see the value. But if we do see the value, then we're going to validate it as if the rules applied.
Okay.
I mean, take that back. The rules apply.
The rules apply.
Not as if.
You never skip the rules. You never want just let arbitrary things through.
The only time you skip the rules is if somebody wiped the field before it got to validation, or if it didn't change and it's exactly the same as it was before.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So
otherwise,
when we do
to the rules.
FeatureGate wiping, I think wiping by default is consistent with what we do in the majority of cases. There are still specific fields for which we would say we would rather fail than wipe if we see data coming in, someone trying to use this field when the gate is disabled. And so
I'd say as soon as we have declarative field wiping working,
declarative wiping to say, like, do we want to wipe or do we want to fail? Like that makes sense to
That's
have.
right. Right. Okay. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but let's get basic field wiping working first.
An annoying question about the vernacular here. So the old way was it wasn't actually triggered directly off the FeatureGate most of the time. Most of the time what we did is we had in use to detection that would flip an option that was then passed in through validation.
Well, the wiping happened in strategy and
that's off the gate.
The gate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then most of the handwritten validation was off an option. There was in-use detection, which often would just look to see when not a FeatureGate was set, but sometimes, or if the field was already set, but sometimes could look at multiple fields to determine if the in-use was on.
Oh yes, that was a part of this. This was the multiple field thing. Thank you. That brought it even clearer to my memory. They had this field in question, or the KEP in question had 3 different fields, and they wanted to say if you used any of them. I'm trying to remember the details.
Then you had in use of the feature, and the option would be turned on, right?
Right. I had told them you need 3 separate options for this, and they wanted to, or maybe it was the opposite of that. Gosh, my memory is terrible. Anyway, I think we've got a clearer position. Like if the feature is enabled and data is present, then you're able to use it. And that for the vast majority of cases of adding a single new field, that's going to be enough.
Yeah.
And if we end up with weird corner cases, these primitives still work. So we can special case if we need to. I think ultimately this is the escape hatch. You can do anything with this if enabled, if disabled chain.
Yeah, being able to do anything is great. Make it, the harder it is to use DB tags to do things that we don't really want people doing.
I think this is not obvious or easy for people. We had to walk into this, and ultimately, like having done now one KEP cycle where I was really only reviewing DV tags and very little handwritten validation, it was so much nicer to be able to just flag this at the DV level instead of having to go stare at validation code. I don't know, Jordan, if you felt that yet, but for me, this is the first time I was like, "Oh, thank God."
I'm not as much of a DV expert, and so I like the idea of just reviewing the typescope files. I'm not yet at the point that I'm confident that what I'm reviewing is actually doing what I think
Fair
it's
enough.
doing.
I mean, I actually did go read the generated DV code just to make sure that it mapped to what I expected it to map to. But to be able to go back to these PRs and say, don't include handwritten validation because I don't want to look at it, was pretty nice. Because, oh my God, that code is boring.
Great.
The tests for it are even more boring.
Okay, so Youngri, Aaron, you can pivot the doc towards this other mode.
Yeah. So I took some AIs and I'll just kind of just to make sure we're on the same page. I think we'll update the feature gate and API changes document to reflect the new standard, which is essentially we can explain that you can use if enabled forbid, or if enabled is to like just use the forbidden style, but essentially we will drop them for the normal case that we document and explain to folks, and that'll be like an aside. And then I can go through and analyze the current code for handwritten just to look at those cases and just make an issue around that. And yeah, I think that those are the main takeaways from this. And then I think some good side cases as far as just actually document also emulation version, how we might relax or modify validation over time, as well as the forbidden piece. Yeah, I think the AIs I took. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add or might be missing there, but yeah, I think this is a good standard as far as if the feature is enabled and exists, you can use it.
Okay. So if the security is disabled and we're not explicitly forbidden, right? For principle, the field wiping should handle it first.
The spot where we're doing field wiping, like wipe or forbid, but I think that's prior to validation. Is Kate's forbidden? Like, is that a thing? Does that exist?
Yeah, it works. It's exactly for cases where we were like, look, we don't know what to do with this, so you can throw a forbidden in. I mean, it started as let's just use it for testing, make sure that we can plumb it all the way around.
Okay. That feels sort of like our always deny admission plugin. Like, why? Like, reject all rights to everything. Like, why do we have this? That feels like a useless thing to have.
But see here, it was really useful.
But I don't like this use. I think this is the wrong use. I think doing this in validation is not right.
Maybe as I was, but just for context, essentially that's like the forbidden tag. Essentially, if the field is set is in the non-zero value, it just fails. But yeah, that's like what it is. It's just a primitive in that, and it runs at validation time.
Okay.
I mean, if we take away that tag, then there's no escape hatch for weird cases, right? Maybe that's okay. I don't know of any other place that uses it for real, except for these sorts of weird cases.
Yeah, just as an example, like so if enabled, if disabled has this chaining, also the idea would be that if you have a type modality, then you can do like a switch. So essentially a lot of times, like if it's in some mode, these fields become possible. These fields are no longer allowed. So then in that case, you say this field is forbidden with this kind of conditional. It just looks very close to what you're looking at right now, which is to say like if, mode is so-and-so forbidden.
Although, Aaron, we did, if I recall, we talked about whether forbidden should be explicit or implicit there, right?
That's a good point. Yes. Yeah.
I haven't ventured into the fancier tags, so I don't know all of the like little logical branches.
The can of worms is open, but the worms are still not very far out. So
I guess it's just to explain, I guess, that currently it's like a building block primitive. I understand that it's like we don't know if it's an anti-pattern, but that all it is a tag that pretty much makes it so it cannot be a set value. And we have so far, obviously, because it used directly, like it's used in the conditional cases is where it's interesting. Like this one with the gates, and then another one where it's the mode switch.
Okay. I guess like validation being informed by feature gates feels like a smell. It's almost never what you want. So like making sure we don't, wherever we document it, we explain clearly, like if you're doing this normal thing, like adding a new field, you probably want to be doing this instead. If you're doing this normal thing, like loosening or tightening, you probably want to be doing this instead. And putting pretty good examples over like, here's the 1 or 2 or 3 places we can think of where validation being feature gate informed is actually what you want. Because people will construct stuff once we give them building blocks that I'm not sure we want.
Totally. And I'm taking that as an AI, just going through the code and identifying if we actually use the feature gate in any handwritten logic in any way that is not like, interesting or that we find useful. But I'll be sure to understand that.
And I would say the complicated things we do in handwritten validation are like 3/4 anti-patterns that we don't want people to copy. And maybe, a handful of things that are like, yeah, that seems fine. I don't know how else you would do it.
Yeah, I'm looking right now at where the places we use forbidden are. And Aaron, some of it is in that flow control stuff that you looked at last release, which is already like borderline sane. There's the scheduling stuff that just went in for this release, and that's it. So if we decided, actually forbidden is not a great idea and we want to turn it off, we can do that.
Yeah, we
well, I need to go look at the flow control and decide how we would want to express that. But the workload stuff we could do. And the workload stuff, just to refresh, it was 3 separate fields. And so their concern was if we do it this way of the, exists or has data, then data in any field would allow mutations to the other fields. If they did the option, the or in use way. And the question was whether that's correct or not. And I think what we're saying is, yeah. And it will be validated, which I think is really the important point. And at the end of all this, like we're talking about a really corner case here, right? Like I can't recall ever in 10 years plus of this project, people coming to me saying, I turned a gate on, I used it, I turned the gate off, and I expected it to keep working. Like, it's just not a thing that happens. We just have to be sane about it. Okay, I'm glad we brought it to the group rather than just pushing ahead.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, this is really good feedback. And I think we can the best practice, it sounds like we just mentioned, is to maybe not use that, but just dictate. And we can talk about forbidden again, but that is an option. But essentially, we won't have them be gated. Have the gates be reflected in validation. And that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, awesome. Anything else to discuss here? Otherwise, I think we can wrap it up.
We burned almost a whole hour on that.
Yeah, well, we didn't have any other agenda items, so it was okay.
You all need to record a video. This is how you do it. I can't read the whole thing and get it into my head. So
you want to guarantee we'll burn a whole hour on something? Just start by saying I think this should be pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to update the conventions around APIs. This should be quick. Womp, womp, womp.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.